returning back. Hopefully this is what you got. That is, I would have had a 3/4 probability for capital A something from the cross of capital A little a times capital A little a. I would have had a 3/4 probability of capital B something from the cross of capital B times capital B little b. And I would have gotten a cross of 1/4 little c from the cross of capital C little c times capital C little c. And I should have come up with a 9/64 probability. So that's just the way you could do really large problems, as well as the ones that we did that have multiple trait crosses using probability. Now we're going to move into another idea, that is sex-linked traits. And we have to consider the chromosomes that are in humans. We have 23 homologous sets of chromosomes. 22 of those homologous sets, or 22 of the homologous pairs of chromosomes, are what we call autosomes. That is, they are each like a similar size and shape. They have carried the same traits, although not necessarily the same alleles, as we've talked about. All right. Now another set, or one set, is what we call sex chromosomes. These are chromosomes that determine sex. In our species, the Y chromosome is depicting males. So we have one chromosome that is kind of large, and that's what we can call the X chromosome. And we have one that is kind of small, because that is, after replication, they literally look like an X and a Y. That is because over here, the Y chromosome, the centromere, is somewhat towards the bottom, and that makes it look like a little Y, plus it's small. So when you look at it under the microscope, it really does look like a little Y. Now the thing about the X and Y chromosomes is that the X chromosome is the one of the pair that carries most of the information. In other words, it carries most of the alleles that are going to be determining that individual's traits. And the Y chromosome for males is going to determine its maleness. That is, it's going to be, especially in utero, the one that is like turning on the male hormones that is making that fetus a outie instead of an innie. Basically, all the parts that would be female parts, like the ovaries, are going to go out and become the testes of the male, and other structures also are going to be outward instead of inward. So basically, the Y chromosome is for that. The X chromosome is for the information. So in essence, when we're talking about genetic problems with the X and the X chromosome is carrying stuff, the Y is not. All right, so over here, this is just showing you the female will have 2 X chromosomes though. And because of the fact that the Y chromosome basically in a male is carrying nothing in terms of information for the traits of that individual, then in essence only 1 X chromosome is working in the male. So in the female, that has to happen in all of her cells too. So one of the X chromosomes will turn off per cell. Now this is random, and that means that half of the body will have 1 X chromosome turned off, and the other half of the body will have the other X chromosome turned off. So it's you're kind of a mix still of the genes that are on the X chromosomes. Generally speaking. Sometimes it can cause some issues, but anyway, that's how that generally works. Now notice also that what would be the probability of being a male? That would be 50%, right? And if you look population-wise, we're roughly 50-50. There's a slightly more male births than female births in the United States, and that's because male sperm swim faster, all right? Anyway, okay, so let's look at a sex-linked problem. Color blindness is a sex-linked recessive trait. So I've written here the genes for that. That is, capital A is going to represent normal vision, and little a is going to represent color blindness. Now, to set up a sex-linked problem, you consider female, the female on the left, mated with the male on the right. For the female, you have 2 X chromosomes, and in this case, I'm saying this female is a normal female, but is carrying the gene for the color blindness. So she is what is known as a carrier, and any heterozygous individual is actually a carrier, but in this case, They especially apply it to color blindness, and you'll see why in just a sec. And the male has only, you know, one X chromosome, and in this case I'm saying it's a normal male. So he has the normal, or capital A, on his X chromosome. So as I do the Punnett square, this is showing you the female on the left and the male on the top, my probabilities. So if you notice here, I have the main one that is getting the colorblind gene, that is the little a, is going to be the male. So in this cross, the female was normal, the male was also normal, but because the female is the carrier and the male offspring are getting it, you can kind of see why she would be called a carrier. Generally speaking, this is a sex-linked thing. That is, if you notice that the males of humans are getting more of something than the females in terms of recessive traits, it's gonna be a sex-linked trait most likely, and that's just because of the essence of this Y chromosome deal. Okay, now the ratios, you have to be careful with how you talk about the ratios here. So if I said how many normal males, I would just say 50%. If I said how many normal females, 100% of the females are normal. However, if I said normal offspring, it's still the 75 to 25% ratio that we talked about before. Or if I said offspring that were colorblind, it's still just the 25%. So you have to look at how they're asking you the question and be careful with those ratios because of that.